Now that we have a basic understanding of the buyer's funnel, we started thinking about how specific actions and segments will match up to the different stages in the buyer's funnel. We could use this structure to create our higher order remarketing segments. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll get rid of everything here. We'll just line up the specific actions that we have over here. So the first remarketing list that we might create is going to be an all visitors list. Now, I know I've been railing on the all visitors list, but I've been railing on it as the only list. I do feel strongly that there is a place to have an all visitors remarketing list. It might have a specific place. You might decide to scratch it later on, but it could have a lot of benefits. It could be a good way to spend part of your initial remarketing budget. It'll help you learn about the characteristics and the success and start collecting data on these remarketing campaigns. Top level remarketing list. So that was our third list, adding items to the cart. And then you have somebody who reached the checkout page. So depending on which shopping cart you might be using, and once again, I know I'm talking about an e-commerce example because it's common, but if it's a service page, if it's a services company, this might be your contact page. Whatever page a person is usually on, or the most common pages a person visits before contacting you. If you're a service industry that does not have such a page, so then that the reaching the checkout page might be translated into somebody who has visited at least 5 or 6 pages on your site. You'll be able to use the analytics data in your account to determine, and I'm going to show you how to do that, to determine what trends I should be using for these higher order lists that will indicate whether a person is in what stage of the buyer funnel. So it's not necessarily page based, it's based on your data, but this is a typical example. And then you'll have a list of people who actually converted. So now you see we're starting to get really, really organized here. We have a simple, effective remarketing campaign. We have 5 lists: an all visitors, viewed product page, added items to the cart, reached the checkout page, and converted shoppers. All of a sudden, we're developing a campaign in a sophisticated way. All of a sudden, you're going to start saying, okay, this person viewed the product page. I might want to design these sorts of ads. This person added an item to the cart. I might want to have a different message in my ad. I might want to give them a coupon code, and I might want to bid more aggressively because it's more likely that I'll be able to turn a profit on those clicks. So we're already becoming pretty sophisticated in our remarketing approach, but we can get even more complex. But before we do, one thing I want to point out is that just like the funnel, these lists are going to get narrower and narrower and narrower. That's hard to say. These lists are going to get smaller and smaller. Okay, that's better. There are going to be fewer people in the converted shoppers list than there are in the all visitors list, obviously. But you need to remember that in order to be eligible to run any remarketing list on the Google Display Network, you need at least 100 cookies, which means you need to have at least 100 people in those lists. Or people who reach that checkout page, you need to have at least 100 people within your conversion window. I know we didn't talk about conversion window yet, but we will. But you need to have at least 100 cookies / people on that remarketing list. I typically suggest to try to have a list of at least 500 cookies per remarketing list. Those are the lists that I found to be the most effective throughout all our client accounts. They perform the best because Google could start aggregating that data and they could kind of bid and target those people in a more effective way. Their minimum is 100 once again, but I recommend 500 if you can. So we can get more complex here, right? We could take these 5 higher order top categorical lists and we could break them down even further to become more nuanced in our remarketing approach. And don't get me wrong, it's not like there's anything wrong with a list like this. Even with this list, we're going to be re-engaging people who browse products and they left the site. We're going to be staying constantly in front of people who have added products to their cart and showed a tremendous amount of intent to actually buy, but they need a little bit of a nudge to come back. So there's a lot to accomplish. I'm not putting this down, but if you do have a lot of cookies, it's time to become even more sophisticated in your approach. Remember we spoke about this idea of modifiers in a few lectures ago. So this is where modifiers come in. So say I want to take these high order categories, these remarketing lists, and I want to break them down into subgroups. And if you're familiar with AdWords on search, you could think about this as campaigns and ad groups. So let's say we have our viewed product page. So these are all people who have viewed a specific product page, but not necessarily all those people should be treated the same or should be shown the same message. I might decide to break out my viewed product page by category. So I could have category 1 and category 2. Let's just say, for example, we're home goods, or we sell home goods, and I have people who buy furniture and people who buy accessories for pets. Now, furniture is a lot more expensive. I happen to know that there's a longer sales cycle. I know that accessories for pets have a lower margin. They're cheaper products, but people buy them more often, and they're typically very different types of shoppers. I'm just making all this stuff up, so just bear with me. Just imagine this is all true. So I might, and not I might, if we have the data, you do want to do this. Instead of having one remarketing list for all people who have viewed the product page, any product page, have one remarketing list for anybody who viewed product pages for furniture, and another remarketing list for anybody who's viewed product pages for pets. And this can go on and on. You could have the same thing for kitchenware, and you could have the same thing for bedding and bath, on and on and on. The idea is very important to understand that viewing a product page globally tells me something about the value this customer has to me, because I could predict what they're going to do next. That's the key. The key is that they viewed a product page. That's the high level structure. Now, when it comes to actually creating these remarketing lists, I might want to be more specific in how I target these people, because I could show them more relevant offers, and I could bid, and I could have my frequency capping, which we'll talk in a little bit about, set to a more specific, nuanced, personalized approach to the people who viewed specific categories. But ultimately, the idea is the same, is that the overall value in the context of my entire business, there's a common denominator there, because they all viewed a product page. They're all likely in a certain stage of that buyer funnel. Now, because I want to bid differently and because I want to have separate ads, I might break it down by separate categories. We could do the same thing with added items to the cart. So I might decide that instead of just targeting one remarketing list to anybody who abandoned their shopping cart, I might say I'll break down my lists with people who added items to their shopping cart, and they also had at least more than 5 page views. PV over here stands for page views. So I know that's a more engaged shopper. They spent their time looking. I might want to remarket to them in a certain way. I might also say I'll have another remarketing list that have people who added an item to the cart and their time on site, TOS, is greater than 10 minutes. That might tell me something different on how I want to remarket to them, on how aggressive I want to be. And then you might have another one with people who added items to the cart and they've also had previous sales. So that's an interesting one, right? They've proven that they've bought things from us in the past. They're an actual customer. They've now abandoned their cart. That might be a super aggressive bid. Let's go after them. Let's make sure they come back. These are 3 new ways above and beyond categorical subcategories, or breaking down your remarketing lists in that way, that you could break down your remarketing list by page views, time on site, previous sales. And let's just go through, reaching people who reach the checkout page. So you might want to say, okay, instead of just having one remarketing list to all people who have reached the checkout page and they're at the end of that intent stage of the funnel, or they might be in the beginning of the purchasing stage of the funnel, I might say if the value of all the products in their cart is over $50, they're on one remarketing list, and I'll label that over $50 in the checkout process remarketing list. And I might want to have another list of people who the value of their cart is over $250. It's interesting because some businesses might bid less aggressively to the people who are over $250, because you might have data that indicates that it's very, very difficult and it's very rare that people buy your products that are over $250. You might just not be priced well in the marketplace. Your products might not be connecting up with your customers in that way. The products that are over $50 but under $250, you might know that that's your sweet spot. So you might target that much more aggressively. So how you want to treat or the variance in your ads and your aggressiveness with the bids and your other targeting parameters might change based on your business, but once again, this idea is the same. And with converted shoppers, instead of having one remarketing list that targets all converted shoppers, you'll have a remarketing list that targets anybody who was a previous customer that has more than one sale in his history. And you'll have another one where he or she is a previous customer where this is their first purchase, and you might want to remarket that person with special offers. You might want to increase brand awareness with sending them to your blog, with sending them to your About Us page, and you might want to just remarket products and e-commerce to people who have purchased in the past. So you could start seeing how sophisticated and how nuanced we could break out our funnel-based segmentation into further remarketing segments. And just in this very simplified, easy organized example, we took a remarketing campaign that had initially 5 remarketing lists, and now we have 10 remarketing lists. We doubled it. And if you really think about it, you could create, if you have enough cookies, if you have enough information, and there's enough value in the difference of these characteristics, you might have 100, 150 remarketing lists, although that's probably overkill for 99% of you at that point. I know that we don't have a single client, and we have clients spending many millions of dollars on their PPC and their other marketing, and we've never had a client that's had 100 marketing lists, because it just becomes overkill, and it becomes you become too neurotic about minor variances in data. But that's a point that we already spoke about. No need to overkill that point. So here's your follow-up assignment. Using the list of characteristics that were meaningful to your business that you created for the previous assignment, I want you to start breaking down those characteristics by stages in the buyer's funnel. Step 1 is think about your particular buyer funnel. Go through the different stages. Then think about what behaviors on your website would indicate to you that that person is in a specific stage in the funnel, and label what stage of the funnel that person is in. So create a remarketing campaign structure with 4 to 5 higher order remarketing lists like we have here, but using your specific behaviors. The way we broke it down here was by specific page views. You might break it down that way also, but you might have more creative and a different way of breaking down your top order remarketing lists. So you'll have 4 to 5 of the remarketing lists. Then I want you to take those 5 and do what we did here, breaking them down into further subcategories that are meaningful, that just logically, without having to mine through your data, without taking a look at all your Google Analytics data or whatever tracking data you have now, just logically, intuitively, using what you know about your customers, break down those higher order remarketing lists into 3 to 4 sub-lists for each, and then think about why you're doing that. Think about what is going to be the difference in my messaging, what is going to be the difference in the value of this remarketing list, as opposed to it just being in that higher order list. And for example, what is the value of us remarketing to people differently based on the different product categories they viewed? And like we explained, we might have a different ad or a different bid for people who viewed furniture product pages versus people who viewed pet supply product pages. So think about that for your own example. Planning out the value and the content of your remarketing lists, so you could then go into your actual campaigns and start building them with a very clear action plan in mind. You could stick to it, and you could ultimately have a lot of success with remarketing. So thanks a lot, guys. Get to that assignment if you can. Once again, no pressure. I just think it will be helpful, and I look forward to seeing you guys very soon in the next exciting chapter.